Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Starz TV series and everything in between. This is episode 90, The Scottish Prisoner, week 22. Hi, Karen. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have Karen Daugherty, the Outlander Medicine emergency physician, with us today, and we're going to be just doing a wrap-up of The Scottish Prisoner and talking about some of the highlights from the book a little bit and the author's notes and our favorite words that are at the end of the book. So, Karen, how are you today?
I'm good. We had a little bit of a bumpy night with thunderstorms and power outages, but all is well today, so I can talk with you this morning.
Yay! I'm so glad after we got our technical difficulties handled. So,
oh my, yes.
My first question is, what did you think of John figuring out that William is actually Jamie's biologically? Like, what was your response to that? As he's standing at King George's funeral service.
It's almost like you can see the gears in his head moving. How can he maybe help Jamie through this? How can he be closer to Jamie through this? I think he's definitely shocked, but intrigued a bit of how this is going to play out, seeing what could be in the future.
Well, especially because he ended up being the guardian of William when Lord Dunsany dies. So all of those pieces were already in play, and it makes me sort of wonder if it was in the back of his head the whole time, since he was curious about it, but no one talks about it.
Just can't bring himself to see it.
And it always strikes me so interesting because we tend to be, or seemingly are, such a more blunt society, though apparently we're not, because people tell me I'm so frank all the time and they're shocked by it. It's so refreshing. I'm like, I don't have time for games. There's no subterfuge here. Anyway.
We're definitely more open books, that's for sure. Well, social media aside, but just in general, maybe it's because we're in Colorado. Maybe it's because I have Midwestern roots, but it does seem that we're more open books.
Formality and structure of relationships, and you can really see how the class order works. That he had to make up a reason to go talk to him before he left Hellwater.
I mean, just the whole basis of the story, where these two had to leave their societal norms to find each other and build a friendship again that could never have happened within their normal society structure. Just very regimented and rule bound.
Well, and even when, say, even if Jamie hadn't been considered a traitor, right, after Culloden, and he was still the Laird, even though he would be considered equal status to John, if not higher, more like Hal, that they still, the tension of Scots they're not equal to us anyway. I mean, there's still that inequality, and John always being so surprised that Jamie is so well read. What filter are you seeing this guy through? He reads more than you do. It's that sense of he still has that bias that is so
completely
obvious.
You know Latin, you know Greek. How is that possible?
He knows German too. Why would you not suspect he also knew German?
Particularly after knowing him at Ardsmuir and knowing his chess game and knowing that he's well read, it still comes as a shock just because of that prejudice.
It's interesting. And then I loved the contrast to Jamie feeling that same prejudice towards Betty. Like he would never marry her.
Right?
Are you kidding? You're beneath me.
The irony.
And then he checks himself. That was one of my favorite aspects of this book, is if you don't read it, you really have no idea about the incredible similarities between John and Jamie, that they are very similar men. How they do things is similar. One's a little bit more rash than the other, just because he has the privilege to be so.
Both live by honor and of their own code, of their own flavor.
Yes, they do. And to look at that gives you such a better and deep meaning to who Jamie is. And I think people miss quite a bit of detail and definition if they don't read it, if they've never taken the time to spend. I mean, we spent 5 months on it, but that's only because we went two chapters at a time. But that's a weekend read for somebody who likes to read. So I hope other people pick it up as well. Or they think it's not Outlander, so I don't want to read it.
There is that. I think some people just really prefer the Outlander characters. But I think maybe now that Seven Stones is just released, maybe there'll be more interest in reading all of the other novellas, which should be good. One interesting thing, and maybe that is why some don't like the novellas as much, is because it's not from Claire's narration. Maybe we become so used to reading about these people through Claire's eyes. I don't know.
The changes, though, as the books move forward, we don't see that. In Voyager particularly, we don't see them as being in the same space at all for a good portion of the book, actually. You have to get pretty far in. And we see so much from Jamie's perspective. We still don't get quite the detail that we get from the Scottish prisoner when we find out really how Willie came to be. Like, he explains it to Claire, but it's nothing like we actually see it in action. He's talking about it more. So it's interesting. I just hope people read it. And I hope they read the Lord John books as well, because you get more information on his father, who we have learned has been killed himself because he was going to be arrested as a Jacobite traitor. And more about Stefan.
And I can't wait to read more about Minnie. I have not opened Seven Stones. I'm so excited.
She's amazing. I love her. One of the things that when we look at the author's note here is Diana talks about, explains the Wild Hunt, that it's really not from Celtic mythology. And the person, Thomas Lally, was actually a real Comte, but he came in after this date. I like how she says, I just fudged it a little bit. Even though he served Charles Stewart as an aide-de-camp, and he was part of this, and he was probably mixed up in various Jacobite plots, she sort of just added it into an earlier year by about 1 year. And he ended up getting back to France ultimately, and then he was tried for treason and beheaded. Well. So poor Thomas just went from one kind of hell to another and actually never was able to recoup.
Only to be exonerated 20 years later. It's pretty sad.
Well, it makes me wonder then, because if he did have any family, which is not spoken of in here, and I haven't had the opportunity to look it up yet. So, interesting. So what did you learn about bog bodies? That's the next topic that comes up in the author's notes.
It's like mummies. It's like mummification. And I was curious, will we ever find out who the bog body was? If it matters. But then with Diana's books, you always think everything comes back. Everything matters. So
I know. Somehow it does. And you're like, hey, I remember that person from this one detail 4 books ago. I don't know how she keeps it. And all in her head, because she doesn't keep regular notes like, I don't know, you or I would. Like, we would probably have an Excel spreadsheet.
I need one when I read the books.
With everything. And apparently, Inishclara is a real place and has a real monastery. I will tell you, Wikipedia for Ireland really sucks, and I couldn't hardly find any photographs that were a free use for commons. There's like no information. It's very strange. So I really couldn't find anything on this actual place.
I want to say that I've seen pictures posted like as part of reviews of the Scottish prisoner. I'll have to look. I thought I'd seen some people had traveled there and posted photographs of it.
Well, there's a couple, but I couldn't use them because they weren't for everyone to use. Oh, yes, I know. I'm like, come on, people, post free pics. So the rest of us can actually share them. So it is interesting. I wonder if he has anything of significance. When I was reading that section in the book when Jamie was burying Tobias Quinn, that it was more like a ceremonial killing again because the cup was gone. Like that's what the spirits were doing. Because it seemed like it was the same man walking with the old gods. And that they were going to kill him again. And that didn't sit well with Jamie. So he gave him back the cup. So was he some kind of druid king? I don't know. He might come back. But he definitely had to have some significance for Tobias Quinn to like kill himself over after getting that cup. Yes. And then all the other significant people that she used that were actually part of 18th century society were George II, George III, and Horace Walpole.
I love that we get this insight into the funeral proceedings. That was really interesting.
It sounds miserable at
cold.
best,
she describes cold so effectively that you can't help but like, oh my God, I totally understand how cold those feet must be on that hard rock floor. Like, it's painful.
And I love that the one guy was stepping on the robes of the Duke just in order to get his feet warmed up. And the thing is, it's still the same today. Do you think they'd break out space heaters?
That would.
If it was March and they were doing a state funeral at Westminster Abbey, everybody's still either too hot or too cold.
I could totally feel that when she's describing that.
And all the stink in the air and all the bodies. I'm like, no thanks. Yeah, no. That is one modern invention I'm so thankful for is anti-perspirant and deodorant. And daily showers or baths.
When we get back to Voyager again, which makes it all the more incredible that you don't hear more of that from Claire. Like she just, well, I guess she has enough in the game that it's worth it to do it anyway. But man, those conveniences.
Ugh. I know. I would say, yeah, I could totally understand why Claire would
hesitate.
Yes.
Or
I would see why she'd be like, I do want a hot bath. I want to be able to turn on tap and not stink. Yeah, like just be able to actually use some like not lye soap on me.
Oh.
It's so funny. I know. I think that and go, yeah, thank you for modern stink resistance.
I wonder she's on such a, drive to get everybody brushing their teeth and showering more frequently. It's not just for their own good.
It doesn't require that much water to like clean your underarms and your bottom every day. I'm just saying.
Man.
And brush your teeth. It doesn't require much. I was thinking about all those people. No wonder Hal, who has a migraine, can barely stand up. And all of people's perfumes, and he's ready to just pass out. And the poor asthma the guy has. And you get outside and it's not any better because of all the fireplaces burning. Yeah. You needed to go live in the country if you wanted to have clean air. London was a really nasty place, actually. Yes, I hope never to attend a state ceremony at Westminster Abbey any time of year. Maybe there'd be like a week in May it would be fine and a week in October. Other than that, I don't want anything to do with it.
Oh, my goodness.
The perfect weather.
1 week of this year, 1/2 the spring and 1 week in the fall. That's all I got for you.
It's sort of like going to New Orleans. You got to pick your day. Otherwise, you're too hot. It's too humid.
That's
and you just deal. Exactly. And what my favorite part of the author's notes are some of the words and phrases that she decided to highlight at the end, particularly making love. Our perspective is that somebody actually had sexual intercourse. Like that's what we think. It's not just kissing. It's not all the hand holding and writing love letters and doing all the wooing behavior. But back then, that's what it was.
It's funny how things change. And reading these, I was wondering, now that we have social media and we're all online and the whole world's connected, are we seeing it change even quicker? I don't know. In new words and new meanings for words.
Oh, I think so. I think it's taken some lids off of boxes that maybe needed to stay closed as far as I'm concerned. And you know me, I'm not a prudish person at all. But looking at cultural, behavioral changes surrounding it is pretty wild. I mean, it just 15 years, 20 years since we had like MySpace and just the beginnings of social media interactions, how crazy it's gotten.
I even look at my kids. They're tweens. And they just have this... I mean, I know kids have always done this, but it seems like it's just even faster the way they adopt new words and new sayings and new trends because they just see it all on YouTube and on Snapchat and whatever. It's kind of crazy. But the term making love, I mean, I love the old meaning of it. It makes sense, whispering sweet nothings and reading romantic poetry. It's really cute.
It's some pretty body poetry. They were like, woo. But it was interesting in here that it notes that it's only a male activity.
Yeah.
The men only were the ones doing these things, that were doing the wooing behaviors. They would give flowers, whisper sweet nothings, and she says, or going so far as kissing, cupping breasts, we assume. but certainly not including sexual intercourse. Yeah, well, part of that probably had to do with the fact that the amount of clothing that women wore and access to privacy was really not what we have today. So trying to get clothes off, there was very little like actual probably naked sex going on. It was just too difficult.
The ladies made to come help take everything off.
And get it all back on. Can you imagine? Hold on. I mean, the term quickie probably did not come into existence.
Good word point we could make.
Probably did not truly come into existence until we stopped wearing so many clothes. And then she points out the word gagging.
Yeah.
And hoaxing.
Which we still use like a gag gift.
Oh, yeah. And she said it's a Scottish word, even though it's not Gaelic, which is interesting because it's made it into lexicon probably in most languages at this point in the world. The spelling of whiskey.
Yes, I did not know this until I started reading Outlander, but now I drop my E now.
You drop your E in deference. Oh, that would be a cute T-shirt.
I like that. I might need a glass that says that or something. A little whiskey glass.
We should have it made. We could totally do it. But it's really specific to Scotch whiskey. Irish whiskey is with an E. Most American whiskeys are with an E or other whiskeys in the world. They just decided that they did not need that E in there to make any sort of point.
No time for that.
Yes. Well, they do tend to be conservative with things, so probably that might be why. Your favorite word that you found in here was pixilated.
It's fabulous. I had no idea there was any meaning before the computer era. But we learn, and this is fabulous, that it means probably a little reference to being away with the fairies or being drunk. So instead of being drunk or wasted, you're pixilated, which I think is awesome because then I picture this, distorted, pixelated computer screen, and oh my god, that makes so much sense. It also
and how somebody can't walk straight, and you're kind of stumbling around. I would say we have to use that at some point and say, "Wow!" In a crowd, seeing drunk people,
you're
trash
so
people.
I love it,
and see if we can get it. I would love to get that word into common usage. That would be beyond amazing.
That's great.
And we're like, yeah, but it's really from the 19th century. We're just making it new again.
Half the time, so just so we know.
It's true. And embranglement. What a word. That's a tough word. Like, we don't use that.
I add that to the list of miasma and alacrity.
Ozone and alacrity. Wait, and what's the other one?
Yes.
Inexorable.
Embranglement. And it does. She's right. It sounds, it is just like what it sounds like. An entanglement. I love it.
Yes. Physical, legal, or emotional.
We know where we are with this book.
All the different words for Scots, Scottish, or Scotch.
It's confusing.
Scotch is used to refer to natives of Scotland, but that dropped out of favor in the mid-20th century. Scots and non-Scots don't use it hardly ever anymore. When you hear about it, it's totally not common usage, and people look at you funny. Like if I hear the word Scotch, yes. I think it's a drink. The other one that I'd never heard before was Yellow Johns or Swarthy Johns.
I had not either.
They were apparently common Irish insults of the period used to reference the English. And she says God only knows why.
Yeah. Yellow Johns.
In use from 1685 to about 1766. And then she also makes the references to the two Gaelic languages of Ireland and Scotland, where they started as the same language called Erse. And she says until 1600, it was basically the same language. And then they started having different variations. And so it was Gaelic in Highlands and Gaelga in the Irish Gaelic. So they did have that change. I love that. The reference if I can read Spanish, I can probably read Italian too and get...
My grandmother actually was fluent in Gaelic. She died when I was a teenager, but I so regret taking more time to listen and learn from her, at least some Gaelic. she came to the US when she was in her 20s, but what a gift that would have been. When Agav was here a couple years ago, I loved getting that, introduction to Gaelic. So maybe I can, when he's coming back again, I understand. Will he be teaching us some more Gaelic, you think?
I'm sure we could find an opportunity if it comes locally. I love how Diana points out in here that she had no idea that Gaelic was the native tongue of the Highlands when she started writing Outlander.
Yeah. And I like how she's like, I think maybe I should go see this place now that I have a 3-book contract. That's awesome. And people comment on the fact that she was able to describe the land and the atmosphere so astutely without ever visiting for the first book. It's pretty remarkable. Of course, we know what her research is like.
Yes, absolutely. She's excellent at that. It's fascinating to me that, and with Gaelic, we see that, especially through Agav, that there's so many different variations, even within the speakers, that you can tell if somebody's from a specific part of the western part of Scotland or if they're from the northeastern part. It can be to where, just like the Spanish-Italian reference, where they can understand each other, but they may not directly be able to speak to each other. And so I really wonder if, like the native speakers, because they never left their little towns, that they just didn't share enough with other people who were the same speakers, and the language shifted and changed over time. Absolutely. And the other word that's funny that she decided to highlight in here was Scheisse, which is German for shit, because they said it so much.
Oh, yes.
I find that so endearing that Minnie will not allow Hal and John to curse in the house unless they do it in another language. So they get very creative with their Latin, German, French cuss words.
I want to know more.
She's fascinating. She could have her own. She and Hal could probably have their own set of novellas, and it would
hint,
be
hint, nudge, nudge. Yeah,
fabulous. I know, right? Okay, so Diana's going to have to write till she's 120 in order to get all the stories out that everybody wants her to write.
We got have some time.
Yeah, average lifespan's 89 now or something. I don't think it's that high, but I don't know. She may have a picture of Dorian Gray somewhere, because she doesn't look like she ever ages. I mean, the clothing changes, but she doesn't age at all. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting to end the book was that Jamie ends up giving Betty Mitchell his whole purse of money that Hal gave him. Because we didn't know what he would use it for, but it was supposed to be substantial enough to basically support his family.
Is he being the Laird again and taking care of his people, and Betty's one of them? I did.
This is interesting, right? Because he said, he had that, he was dreaming about William, and that he felt like Lollybrock, broke away, and the other parts of him kind of shattered. They were gone, and all he had was this place.
And these are his people to some degree, perhaps?
Yeah.
Or does he feel bad because of the initial reaction he had to Betty? You're not good enough for me. But then retracts that a bit. I don't know. I think it had to do with more what you were saying, where just in his character, where he really wanted to take care of her because he felt like he should. He felt like it was his duty to some degree. Maybe it was because she was interested in him and she just wanted to be married. Maybe there was some aspect of her probably knowing the whole story and that he's actually William's biological father. She's
the fact that he was... she's got to know. And the fact that he thought she only wanted to, have a toss with him in bed, and that's not what she wanted at all. And he was, surprised. Why would anybody think of marrying me? I'm no catch. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're a bit too chaotic for me, but you're definitely a catch.
He comes to really care for her and wants her wed well and happy in life and
have her own babies. He's such a romantic family man. He really is.
Which is so sad.
I think the fact that she cusses a blue streak. really endearing to him. I mean, it reminds him of Claire's like, oh, Claire would be impressed.
That says a lot.
It does say a lot.
Or maybe he identifies her as, she's got so many similarities to Claire. Maybe that's why he feels the need to be so generous with her too. I don't know.
And that she was Tobias Quinn's sister-in-law. Yeah, and that's one of the ways he could lay Tobias to rest, maybe. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that until right now, this second. There's so much there. So you have Lady Dunsany, who's as savvy as one can get. And she's trying to get her daughter properly married off without putting her at risk like her sister, Geneva. And he's got this other groom he has to deal with and frankly doesn't really care. Whoever, just get the job done. Like, I don't care who's in charge. And he's still there for about 3-4 more years. I'd have to look up the date.
How old is William right now? 3?
He's still there. Okay. Almost 3 years old. And so he stays for a little bit longer. And William, the only person that William responds to properly as an authority figure is Jamie. Nobody else disciplines him. But Jamie can tell him no, and he listens.
How hard?
He doesn't throw fits. He doesn't fight. He just does it. Okay.
Yeah. Like, he can read him. I got it. I know. Mac,
So, because I think it's probably like 3.5, maybe 4 years that Jamie stays there longer. He was imprisoned in the cave. He was in Ardsmuir. And now he's here. So he will have been here basically almost his entire adult life. He has not even been at Lallybroch.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 40. And what do you think of how the foreshadowing was surrounding him feeling like he's still married? He can't imagine getting married to somebody else ever again. He doesn't think that he's would be a serviceable husband. I mean, and it was brought up several times in these chapters. I mean,
yeah.
And that he would have to ask John's permission anyway, so whatever. I don't even know how that would work, he says. I don't even know.
And Claire have that connection. Despite being in different times and places. I mean, maybe that's speaking to the fact that he still feels that she's there and it would be cheating on her or, unfair to her.
Something. But we actually, if you don't read The Scottish Prisoner, you don't get the detail and the depth of that
connection.
It's not despair. Connection, I don't have an appropriate word for it right now, but that it's still so live to him. But it is to her too. When you read Voyager, you see more from her perspective on how it is. And that she would wake up like he was right there. And so I'm thinking when he's having those experiences, she's having them at the same time.
Have we ever looked at any of the books to see if those time frames line up that we could tell? Like when she has those vivid dreams of him and is it happening at the same time? I don't know.
I think it probably must be. I don't know how it isn't. I mean, all that timey-wimey, time is not a straight line.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it has to be because otherwise neither of them would feel that depth of togetherness still. But the other part of that being highlighted about him not feeling like he could be a serviceable husband, that he's still married, that he shouldn't be moving forward in that way and doesn't feel like he wants to. And that coupled with the fact that he doesn't feel like Lallybroch is home anymore. Like it's already been stated in the Scottish Prisoner that he feels like his home will not know him again. He can't really go home, even though he might go home, that it's not his place. And so he kind of doesn't have a place. So he becomes a man totally without roots except for Willie, who he can't claim.
A laird without land.
Mm-hmm. And he doesn't really have people.
Although this little community, William, Betty, John to some degree might be starting to become that.
But he really, I know, but he can't be. Hi, so for 6 months, we're going to gallivant around all these other places. Then I'm bringing you back. Or 5 months, whatever it was. And now we go back to this excessively formal, restricted relationship. I mean, when you can't even figure out how you can like say goodbye to somebody.
So awkward.
And make it not appear awkward, yeah, or just totally inappropriate. I was like, well, you do need a horse, John. And Tom Bird could certainly talk to him because he's like, but I guess a valet is something above a house servant. I don't know. I would not have done well in that time. I don't follow these kind of rules real well. I can't even imagine trying to like deal with that. I'd be like, this is too complicated. I don't even want to. And it's just a way to be classist and sexist, and I don't really care. But it seems like he's so rootless, and that the only thread he has is hanging on to Claire and hanging on to what he can of Willie without being too obvious.
That's a fine line. It's tricky.
I couldn't do that.
Child. Oh.
I know, but he's not. So I know that's the thing where it's like, yeah, but he's not legally, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, so sad.
So then we have to look forward to the future of John becoming, we presume, his guardian, right? Because Lord Dunsany's not going to live forever. And wonder what's going to happen to Lady Isabel. And we know that Jamie gets out because we've all gone through Voyager. So, and what kind of happens to him. But looking at his state of mind, he probably needs some like serious R&R and some therapy.
To the least, yeah.
I mean, the poor guy. And he can't even, it's like, when's the last time he stepped into a church? When's the last time he's able to see a priest? When, all the things that are important to him, or really like have a Bible of his own.
I'd love to see more of his time in Edinburgh before Claire comes and his life there. More than just what Voyager is showing us.
Yeah, because we don't really see a lot.
Like how, was he finding some solace in the community?
It doesn't seem so. He's using how many different names?
Multiple communities, yeah.
I mean, he has Fergus, right?
That's true.
And he's giving money back to his family, Lollybrock, but he's still doing his kind of thieving, ethical kind of things that have ethical considerations. He's still doing all these things, and he has how many aliases? I mean, that's not...
You're exactly. I was about to say, it's not being very grounded. Yeah.
No, and he's somebody who needs to be he needs a grounding force. He needs that purpose. And so the purpose became William while he was at Hellwater, and that's what kept him going. And probably that ethereal time-space continuum connection with Claire. But then after that, I mean, we know it wasn't Leary. That was a disaster, predictably a disaster. And the fact that Claire shows up, her ghost or spirit or whatever shows up between them.
You gotta listen to those signs.
Maybe you should have stopped that. This is not until death do us part thing. But yeah, and now after going through the Scottish prisoner again in such detail, I finally can understand why he felt so guilty for marrying her.
That's true.
Because I'm always, why is he apologizing? Why would he ever apologize to her? Why would he ever feel guilty? Because she entered into it falsely, as I think, as well. Basically, she didn't really want to be his wife. She wanted to be married to him.
Big difference. True. Yeah.
Big difference. She didn't know what to do with him when she got him. I feel like I'm finally understanding, even though I've read all of it before. I don't normally stop 2 chapters at a time in detail. You kind of absorb. You don't look at all the little, what's the punctuation saying about this sentence? But it's fascinating to me because it does explain why he had such an incredible level of guilt, and maybe why he didn't tell Claire right away.
Yeah.
Because it's so multi-layered. He really didn't feel like he should be someone's husband again, but he was so lonely and he was so detached and he had no one and he had nothing to ground him. So he kind of pity married her, maybe hoping for some companionship, right?
That he did it, and ashamed maybe that he was so weak that he needed to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, he felt it like it was a weakness, but he knew it wasn't a good match. He just kind of hoped. He did that coming on the heels of leaving Hellwater and losing his only connection to William. And though John is probably the closest friend he might have, we all know how that is. He can't really be his friend, even when he's released. They have no reason to interact. He thinks he's never going to see William again. He's probably never going to see Lord John again. And he's completely without anything. He's got no foundation left. And so maybe that's plays into the fact that he didn't tell Claire right away. Fearful of, of him, how he's been making decisions. He doesn't know how to fully live. He can do all the stuff required to pay the bills.
Living.
Yeah, and the intimacies are gone. So he doesn't have any of that with anyone. And so I don't know. It's fascinating. It'll be interesting to look at it as time goes forward.
This is definitely a great companion to Voyager. They get just so much more information and so much more insight, especially about their relationship primarily, but even about the events at Hellwater. But yeah, I can't imagine. The first time I read through the books, I didn't look at Scottish Prisoner at all, but it adds so much.
Yeah, and I think it just gives so much important detail on Lord John, and then you can see how he responded to Claire and Voyager when they were on Jamaica. Yeah. Because his connection with Jamie at that point is William, right? I mean, he's his caretaker. So, and he marries Lady Isabel, which we know from Voyager. Yeah. Anybody who's in this book has already read Voyager. No spoilers there. No spoilers. But we can see how he would have such a visceral response to her. Because remember when Jamie had that dream about her at Argus House that he happened upon, and how deeply that affected him when Jamie was calling out to Claire.
I want to go back and read Voyager.
Yeah. Right? But that's would explain because they don't have, it's not like I can just text you every day and ask you questions and be like, how you doing today, Karen? Like, what's up? How's your family? They couldn't do that. They could have excessively minimalistic communication, if any. His communications are far and few between. They have to make up a reason to be in any proximity to each other, even when Jamie's free. So when John sees Claire, that jealousy, totally get it. What he has maybe have been years prior, but that's all he has to hold on to, and that's the memories that he has and the experiences that he had with Jamie. It's not like they can make up. They're not doing buddy films.
And it'll take a long time for him to be able to see and accept how much she adds to him and how good she is for him. But
that he and her can be friends.
Yes.
Well, that's definitely a tenuous relationship right there.
Poor Claire just knows nothing of it for so long. Like, I met this interesting man.
Right. Thank you so much for joining. And just for listeners, so you know, as Voyager comes back on, we will be resurrecting Outlander Science Club. Scottish Prisoner didn't have that much sciencey stuff in it because Claire was not in it. Forward to lots of new episodes as the show comes back on in a couple of months. 2 months, 2.5 months, 3 months. We're not exactly sure yet when season 3 is coming back. But check out outlandermedicine.com and follow Karen. She's an excellent writer and she's an excellent physician. And do you have any final thoughts, Karen?
I am super excited for your upcoming Seven Stones book club. So I'm going to get busy with that soon. And I think next week is your first episode. Awesome.
Yes. We are doing the 6th novella as the first one because the other ones are previously published, and then going on to the 7th, which is Besieged. And if we have time, which I don't think there'll be time, I'll go through the novellas that are in this same time period. I will do no time hopping because it's too confusing if people have not read beyond the book that the TV show is in. So I don't want to freak people out. They don't need to know about what happens to characters yet.
Good time.
So I think it's going to be fun. I've already read both of the new novellas this week in the midst of everything else because it's my downtime. That's all. And they're quite good. And you will recognize the little tidbits that Diana has posted when she has her daily lines. You'll definitely recognize them when you get into the novellas. But they're a lot of fun, and getting to know Hal and Minnie better and some circumstances in their lives. And we get to see Harry Quarry too. And then we definitely get to learn more about John's mother in the second one. So that's a good time. Well, thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a fabulous day. And we should do this more often.
So much fun.
Once we get the tech stuff figured out.
We got time.
It's the bane of nerds everywhere. AV problems.
We'll get there.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me.
Oh, anytime. So much fun to talk about Outlander with you. Bye-bye.
So where can you find A Dram of Outlander? Well, of course, the website, adramofoutlander.com, Facebook, A Dram of Outlander page, or you can ask to join the group for easier discussion, A Dram of Outlander. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Dram of Outlander. And how do you support the podcast? Join in on the social media discussions on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Share the podcast and blog posts with other people. Go into iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play and leave a review of the show so other people will have an easier time to find me. You can also financially support the podcast. You can go to patreon.com/adramofoutlander and do a monthly offering, or if you'd like to do a one-time offering to me, just contact me privately at 719-425-9444, the voicemail, or email contact@adramofoutlander.com. And I want to hear from you. I want to get your feedback. I want your comments. I want your thoughts, your theories, or questions. And you can email or leave a voicemail for that as well. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'd enjoyed hearing Karen's voice again today. And until next time, Slán je va.